3.3 Stress, Anxiety and Arousal by Bella Dawson. Right, what is stress, anxiety and arousal? So to start off with, stress is a pattern of negative physiological states and psychological responses occurring in situations where people perceive threats to their well-being, which they may be unable to meet. This is what Lazarus and Folkman said in 1984. Eustress is a positive reaction of a performer to stress leading to optimal arousal, as you can see in this section, in the middle section of the graph, the blue graph. Eustress is a good thing. Distress is an extreme form of anxiety, nervousness, apprehension or worry, where performance will then decrease. Somatic stress is to do with the body, for example, increasing sweat. This is done by the autonomic nervous system. Cognitive stress is to do with the mind. An example of this would be making mistakes. Behavioural is to do with the actions or behaviours, for example, biting nails under stress. Moving on. Anxiety is a negative state of worry, apprehension or tension that often occurs in the absence of real or obvious danger. Typically, the tension felt by anxious individuals is accompanied by a heightened state of physical arousal. This was said by Buckwood and Dishman, 2002. A sporting example of this would be feeling anxious when you're about to hit the ball in cricket. Somatic anxiety is the physical component of anxiety. This relates to your perception of the physiological changes that happen in situations. Cognitive anxiety is the negative expectations and concerns about one's ability to perform and the possible consequences of failure. This was said by McNally, 2002. Trait anxiety refers to anxiety as a characteristic of a person. So this is what a person is. They know their anxious outcomes. It's part of the person. State anxiety is about what's happening right now, the feelings that change in your sports from moment to moment. Measuring anxiety. There are many ways in which you can measure anxiety. For example, observation, so watching someone in a match. Questionnaires, so asking someone how anxious they were or questions relating to. And physiological is seeing their sweat, which shows that they're anxious before a match. There's also two different ways of measuring anxiety. Number one is SCAT, the Sport Competition Anxiety Test. This was created by Martens, 1977. This is where you give a self-report about your specific sports situation, and it gives you an idea of the anxiety, the state anxiety in situations. So there's 4 factors that are to do with competitive anxiety. The individual differences, how they react in their different situations. Number 2, whether they have state or trait anxiety, which they're experiencing. Number 3, a specific trait in competitive situations, and number 4, the competition itself. So you take the trait or the state anxiety, then you follow that along to their perception of the threat, and this then creates their competitive state anxiety. Number 2 is the competitive state anxiety inventory, also created by Martens. However, this was in 1990. This uses a self-report in terms of cognitive state anxiety, somatic state anxiety, and their self-confidence. Their cognitive state anxiety can be high before competitions. There tends to be a steady increase before competitions, and it will fluctuate during the performance in terms of whether they're succeeding or they're failing. However, somatic state anxiety is lower to begin with, as your body won't react as soon, but it does increase rapidly before a competition, and it genuinely decreases during a competition because you realise that there isn't as much anxiety in the competition. You're also not thinking about it as much. Right, moving on to arousal. Arousal is a general physiological and psychological activation, varying on a continuum from deep sleep to intense excitement. It's also a blend of the physiological and the psychological activity in a person, and it refers to the level of motivation, alertness, and excitement at a particular movement. This definition was created by Weinberg and Gold in 2007. So, as you can see by optimal levels, my graph here, this one, I'll make it. Oh no, I can't make it bigger. This one, yeah. As you can see, optimal levels of arousal are in the middle here. This is where excitement happens, your best oh my god, oops. This is where your best performance tends to be, medium levels of arousal, optimal levels of arousal. And if it's any lower or any higher, then that's not optimal levels of arousal. That's not what you should be aiming for. That's when you'll start either you're bored, you don't have enough arousal to want to play the game, or you're over aroused, you're stressed, and you can't focus and properly play the game. With arousal, if arousal increases, as you can see from this top left picture, arousal can happen when athletes get too much information at one time. So Niederfer, 1976, says that increased arousal levels could change attention and concentration. It could either narrow the athlete's field, so you can't look at the external factors, which is the third picture down. They could either be looking at too many cues, overthinking, overcomplicating it, or at the top, they're looking at the perfect amount of cues. They're understanding the situation around them whilst focusing on what they're doing.